Well, hello, friends. Welcome back to Barriers and Boundaries Resilience Leadership Podcast. And I'm very excited to have our guest today, Scott Shickler, Seven Mindsets. And in my mindset, when I think of Scott and I think of Seven Mindsets, I'm thinking innovative leadership. So first off, how are you, Scott? How are you doing today?
I'm great. It's a pleasure to be here with you today. Thank you.
Pleasure's all mine, and the amazing work that you've done. And I'm a big fan of anybody that wants to push the messaging of leadership and innovative leadership and this idea of curiosity and accountability and focusing on what you have at hand and all the things, staying connected. And it's amazing to me. I appreciate your work and some of the data-driven background of that as well. I think that's very important to highlight.
Probably a good place to start. I'm an entrepreneur. I've built and run many companies. I've done a lot of acquisitions. I'm also a father of two sons. And it wasn't too long ago, about 15 years ago, that I asked this I thought was a simple question, something that maybe you can answer with a Google search. Because as a dad, all I really wanted was for my kids to grow up to be happy and successful and really on their terms, not some societal norms. And as a business leader, I wanted to be the best I could be. So I would study very successful entrepreneurs. And at the heart of it, we all want to be our very best. But the data, unfortunately, shows that there's a big gap between what we want and what we're able to achieve in our lives, personally, professionally, and even for our closest loved ones. And so I wanted to know, because you and I know happy and successful people, but we also know people who are kind of miserable and don't really live to their potential. And so I wanted to know, what was the difference? What are some of the happiest, most successful people in the world doing differently? Because Gallup organization, they did a survey, 200,000 adults who have jobs. And they asked a simple question, are you passionate about what you do for a living? Do you love it? And 80% of people say no. You say, okay, you have to love your work, or could you just like it? They knew probably that was the next question. And so they dug a little deeper and they found out that over 50% of adults who have jobs, they don't even like their job. So that's really far off from, we all want to be passionate about what we do. We want to be our best. But if you don't even like what you're doing, you're never going to really be your best. So that led to this idea of, well, what is it that those people are doing differently? And at first I thought you can just do a little Google search. But anybody who tries that, you're going to find what we found 15 years ago, conflicting information. One expert says life reward risks, and another expert says good things come to those who wait. So what are you going to do? And if you look at some of the best business books of all time, you'll also find conflicting information. Well, that led to a 3-year study, and we studied thousands of some of the world's happiest, most successful people, many people that I bet your listeners are very familiar with, and we made it a pretty interesting discovery. And that what these folks have in common, it's not where they live, it's not their gender, their political views, their religious beliefs. It really has very little to do with whether they grew up rich or poor or middle class, how far they go in school. It even doesn't have much to do with the skills that they acquire throughout their lives. It really comes down to a person's mindset, how they think. And we were able to identify 7 mindsets, 7 very specific mindsets. But probably the most shocking discovery we made was that the overwhelming majority of teenagers had the exact opposite mindsets. So you start to say, well, wait a second, maybe that answers a lot. But then we said, well, but where are they getting these mindsets? Where are these teenagers getting these opposite mindsets that may be holding them back? And what we found out, that they're inadvertently being passed on from people who love and care for them, parents and relatives and loved ones. And then we're inadvertently passing on these counter mindsets, what we call these counter negative mindsets, in school. And just to bring this all together for you, we wondered, could we teach the 7 mindsets to young people? And if we could, would it matter? And I won't bury the lead here, and I'll tell you, we actually figured out how to teach the 7 mindsets to young people. We've now taught over 5 million students and educators all over the country and in even other parts of the world these 7 mindsets, and it actually makes a difference in their life. It actually helps them And so we took this sophisticated content from adults, we translated it for kids, and now what we're doing is we're taking that same content and we're sharing it back for adults in the workplace to see the same positive results.
And I love that aspect of let's break the cycle here. Let's see what we can do to crack the egg or whatever, analogy, metaphor you want to use. They may have skill sets, but what are the mindsets here? How do you teach it in a way where it becomes a healthy boundary?
One way of thinking at it, you use the term, how do you crack the egg? I like the expression, how do you flip the switch? Because if most people are inadvertently walking around with counter mindsets or negative thoughts, by the way, it's been estimated that the average person has like 40 to 50, 60,000 thoughts that go through their mind every day. But most of those thoughts are negative thoughts. And the average person has the same thoughts, the same thematic thoughts that go through their head every day. Those are called automatic negative thoughts. I like to think of it as an acronym, NT. It's like we have ants in our brain that get in the way. So if we have all these automatic negative thoughts, that's really impacting our ability to be our best at home and at work, no matter what we do. So we actually have to learn how to flip the switch from the negative thoughts to the positive thoughts, or as we like to say, to move from the negative or counter mindsets to the 7 mindsets. So you say, well, what's the barrier? Well, one of the barriers is our own brains. If we think of our brain as like software, it's like it comes from the factory, pre-wired with barriers that prevent us from being our best. And maybe one of the ways I can explain this is our brain's primary function is to keep us alive. Our brain is constantly scanning for anything that makes us uncomfortable. The brain does not like discomfort, which means the brain likes patterns, predictable behavior, habits. Well, if most of us are picking up these negative habits, things that don't allow us to be our best, the brain says, but that feels good. So that's the factory preset wiring. The brain that kept us alive as a species, that's the mode it's in. But like all the other software we have, we just need to upgrade our software. We need to flip the switch. So is it a barrier if you think to yourself, well, I want to be my best, so I just need to upgrade my software? That's not a barrier.
I'm thinking about how much I enjoyed Windows Millennium Edition 30 years ago.
I bet you and I have had this experience, but a lot of your listeners have had this experience. How about you're about to jump onto an important meeting, and right before you jump on, your software says, you need to upgrade, or your computer just slows down. That's what's happening to our brain. We are dealing with in these specific times, people are dealing with more stress, more uncertainty, more loneliness, more disconnection than ever before. And it's become chronic, and it's literally slowing down our brain. And we have to reboot the system. And so, one of the things why this works is because it's rooted in a scientific term called radical self interest. Now, you and I know this as a more colloquial way of saying it. What's in it for me? We go through life. What's in it for me? We make decisions. Why should we do something? Well, how are we going to benefit from it? Well, we're going through life saying, what's in it for me? Why should we learn something? Why should we make a change? All I'm saying is everyone knows that's listening here. If you would like to perform better in any area of your life, that's your what's in it for me. You say, well, then what's preventing me? And if you found out that what was preventing you was something so simple that you could flip the switch, you'd be all over it.
What does it mean for someone to start with engaging with the 7 mindsets? How do they get to that point of flipping the switch?
Yeah. So as I mentioned, we got to interview a lot of people, probably a lot of folks that your listeners would recognize. One of my favorite interviews was with Richard Branson, Sir Richard Branson. He's the billionaire behind all the companies that have the Virgin name. At the end of the interview, my favorite question was, if you could live your life over again, is there anything you would do differently? And he thought about it and he said, yeah, I'd do 2 things differently. He said, the first thing is I'd start my first business at an earlier age. Well, I said, didn't you start your first company at the age of 9? And he said, yeah, very good. I was like, yeah, okay. All those wasted
Sure,
years.
Pat.
Like, what's number 2? What would you do differently? What's the second thing? And he said, if I could live my life over again, the second thing I do differently is I would dream bigger. Now, EB, when he said that to me, when I was thinking is, I'm talking to a guy who owns 400 companies. He owns his own private island. He scores off the charts on happiness tests. He's one of the most philanthropic people on the planet. And he's telling me he would dream bigger. That felt like a disconnect to me. But we heard the same sort of things from Oprah Winfrey, from Damon John, from Bill Murray. Like people, this was a common theme. And so I'm sharing this with you because we ultimately identified that type of thinking as the first mindset. It's what we labeled the everything is possible mindset. And one of the easiest ways I can explain this is if I asked you to raise your left or your right hand as high as you can, and if your listeners, if they're in a safe place to do it, if I said staying seated, raise your left or your right hand as high as you can, everybody would do that. And then I'd say, okay, is there anybody here without standing up? Is there anybody who can get your hand 1 inch higher? And everybody would. All right. And this is the subtlety of this mindset, is that what Branson realized is that even he didn't understand his full potential. If you think about little kids building blocks and building a tower with blocks, it could take them 5 minutes to get the tower to a certain height, and then it falls. But their brain already knows they can build it to that level. So within 30 seconds, they get the tower right back up to that same height. And so let's apply this so that people can lean into the everything is possible mindset. If we talk about flipping the switch. So one thing I would suggest is look at whatever goals you have, personal or professional goals. Whatever goals you have, imagine that your own brain inadvertently is trying to protect you from reaching too high, because we've all stretched for a goal, a dream that hasn't come true. If we haven't, we're not dreaming big enough. I mean, if we haven't, we're settling. That's the opposite. We're settling. People who like to hit the mark often will lower their goals and dreams because it feels good to achieve. But you're just setting yourself up for a life of disappointment. And so what do I suggest you do is you go to those goals and dreams, whether they're personal or professional, whether it's a team or an organization, and you stretch them 1 inch or 2 inches. When you do that, you release the legal drugs in your brain, make you feel alive. But statistically, when you stretch just 1 inch or 2 inches, you're going to achieve more. That little tiny difference can mean a world of impact for you personally and professionally. So that's one example. If you could trade places with someone else's success, they have the same factory installed brain. Okay, pick any superstars. Let's use sports just as an easy example. Somebody from my childhood, Michael Jordan. Michael Jordan, arguably one of the, if not the best, one of the best basketball players of all time.
Agreed.
Even Michael Jordan has 30, 40, 50,000 negative thoughts coursing through his brain every single day. So it's not that somebody should feel bad that they have it. It's realizing here's the difference. Jordan and other professionals become aware. So they look at that and they say, I didn't know that. I'm glad EB had Scott on today because I wasn't aware of that. And now what they do is they flip the switch from disappointment to enlightenment. They're like, wow, I'm aware of this. Scott said that there's maybe 2, 3 common negative thoughts that we all have each and every day. They're different for different people. Some people, when they go to their mailbox, it's more adults than kids go to the mailbox these days. But when adults go to the mailbox, some people have an automatic negative thought. Uh-oh, is there going to be a bill I got to pay? I don't have the money for the bill. I got to pay my mortgage, my rent. That's a common negative thought. Some people, when they look in the mirror, they don't see the beauty, they see the blemishes. They see the hair turning gray, or they see the clothes don't fit as well. I mean, and so you don't have to see that, but some people have that as their negative theme. Well, once you can become aware of your negative themes, your negative thoughts, you can actually flip the switch and be grateful for that awareness. Because Michael Jordan, when he takes the game winning shot and he misses, if he doesn't know how to capture that and reduce it from impacting his performance the next game, he'll never have the courage to shoot the game winning shot the next time. And so I was just recently coming up with this example. This is an old example, but remember the movie Ghostbusters? So they'd go and they'd catch the ghost and they'd put him in the box. That's kind of what we need to do as individuals. We have to capture the negative thought or shine a light on it, right? So I'll stick with the theme of ants. Ants at a picnic, when there's darkness, they move in a line, they're passing the food over, right? They're stealing all the food at the picnic. You shine a light on those ants, they freeze. They're not as pervasive. So hopefully this helps folks realize that it's totally natural to have these negative thoughts. Thank goodness we have them, because the brain is preventing us from making really, really bad decisions. But that same brain will actually align with a new habit. We can lean into the habit of everything is possible with a little bit of practice.
I appreciate you being able to go there with me, and because that solidifies a lot of thoughts that I've had. And in terms, it may not be Michael Jordan that we're talking to with the 7 mindsets. It might be an engineer who has been asked, "Hey, we think you'd be great for a management position," but the engineer comes back and says, "I don't want to deal with people. I'd rather stick to the machines. I'd rather stick to the software." And it might have been that limited mindset, that those ants, dealing with those ants, of like, I don't know if I'd be a great boss. I don't know if I'd be a great mentor. Like, but I know I'm a great engineer.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that's where this really helps.
I think that's a good point. You're right. You want to try and figure out what's getting in the way. If it's limiting beliefs, then really what we're talking about is really practicing our mindset muscle. We're practicing flipping the switch. And oftentimes when you practice something, then you can actually develop a healthier habit, healthier mindset. So that's one way of determining it. But let's look at another one, because the second mindset is what we call passion first. And I don't know about you, but I grew up with parents and grandparents and school counselors that were always suggesting certain career paths for me. Now they believed they had my best interest at heart, and I think that they had really good intentions as well. But my grandparents would always talk about, we'll go to college, get a certain degree, get a job that'll pay you well. If you're fortunate to be presented with multiple job offers, the calculation would be, well, which one's going to pay me more? Which one has better benefits? If you're starting a business, you might be saying, well, what's the trends? All of these things make rational sense, but EB, we studied the happiest, most successful people in the world, and they do it the opposite way. They start to say, if every job paid the same, what would I choose? If I could start any business in the world, if money didn't matter, how would I spend my time? See, they know that passion is more of an intrinsic motivation. It's an inside job. It's about being authentic. So let's use your same example of the engineer. Maybe what's getting in the way in the engineer's mind is the habit of limiting thoughts. Maybe that's getting in the way. Or maybe what the engineer really is trying to figure out is, what's authentic? What really, forget about what society is suggesting or encouraging, or what may seem like rational advice. They're going to pay me more. That's the upward trajectory. Okay. But is it authentically interesting to you? Are you passionate about it? Because we all know that life's challenging. The workplace is challenging. Unless we have connected what we're doing with things that really matter to us, then when we hit roadblocks, we might give up more easily. So that's why I introduced that passion first mindset. And I always suggest that people find ways of bringing what they're passionate about into the workplace.
The piece on awareness, and I like that you capitalized that. in the mindset and being able to kind of build from there. All right, awareness, what am I passionate about? And then I want to talk about connections, like the importance of connections in the 7 mindsets.
Yeah.
How does that play out?
Well, it's interesting you bring that up, because the third mindset is what we call we are connected. And it's so much deeper than teamwork, which I think of as a skill set. For people in the workplace, most of us in the workplace, we are encouraged to focus on professional development. Professional development, we learn all these new skills. But what our research shows is that what everyone should be focused on first, or doesn't even have to be linear, but at least pause and say, am I focused enough on personal development? There's that streaming show called Severance. I don't know if you've seen it or even heard about it, but this sci-fi concept that if you leave your home and you get on an elevator to go to work, that somehow your brain can be flipped off and everything in your personal life stays at home and doesn't show up in the workplace. Well, that's really doesn't that doesn't really exist. We
Yeah.
know if we're stressed at home, if we've got challenging relationships at home, if we're struggling with finances at home, health issues at home, it does follow us into the workplace. And that same streaming show on the way when you leave work and you get on that elevator to go home, get to the parking lot and go home, in the sci-fi show, it wipes your brain. And so you don't bring any of your work-related stress or issues home. Nice idea.
Yeah.
But it's not really true. And so we have to actually combine personal and professional. So we talk about connections. Life, whether your home life or your work life, it's all about relationships. It's completely about relationships. That's where we get our most joy and fulfillment, is when we work with others and for others and through others. EB, I interviewed a guy named Scott Rigsby, and he was a double amputee that ended up running the Ironman and completing the Ironman. And I remember him saying, he had a quote, it was something like this: if you can achieve your dreams alone, you're not dreaming big enough. And he explained to me that he needed an entire team, an entire relationship group of people to help him with his diet, to help him with his prosthetics, to help him with his mindsets, to help him learn how to adapt. The same exact thing happens in our companies. We have to learn to work with others, for others. We have to learn how to inspire one another, how to empower one another. If we don't do that, we'll never be as impactful as we can. In my company, I've got about 60-ish or so full-time workers. And there was a time where previous management would come in and they would try and encourage people to stay in their lane, stay in your department, focus on your stuff. And I used to think that it's almost like they're creating these invisible borders. Like you can't cross one country to another unless you have a passport. And so I changed that and I said, we're going to become a passport-free zone. People need to feel like you can connect with one another. You can go outside of your lane. You can seek ways to inspire and empower one another. That we are connected mindset is critical to success.
Being able to kind of tap into that, that's going to reinforce like the other aspects of it. What way do you encourage people to engage with the 7 mindsets? Like, how do they get started?
Well, I'll tell you this. I'm like on a mission to create a mindset evolution. I want to help as many people as possible get to that next level. I believe, one of our mindsets, number 6 actually, is called Live to Give. And the Live to Give mindset is the realization that if we can connect something greater than us, a purpose of doing good for others, and we can connect that to things that we're passionate about, then the world will be a better place. Companies will be a better place. And so that's the mission I'm on. And so here's what I want to do. I want to help people learn the 7 mindsets. I want to help them apply the 7 mindsets. And so I've set up with my team a site for your listeners to go to. If they go to 7 mindsets, and it's 7 like the numeral 7 mindsets.com/free. Okay, that's an easy one. 7mindsets.com/free. they could put in their information. We'll give them a free download of our 7 Mindsets booklet. Now, I've got the 7 Mindsets book. It's been a bestseller now for over 10 years. We're approaching 100,000 books sold. So people can get the 7 Mindsets book on audio or Amazon or on our website. But the 7 Mindsets booklet is like a little mini guide that actually has a really brief overview of each mindset. And it has 4 suggested things, 4 suggested steps that people can do at no cost to them. They take minutes. And so they can get a free download of that. The other thing that we do is if they want, we put out a morning mindset. It's one of the first things I do every day. And I'm the co-author of this stuff, but I'm a practicer as well, a practitioner of this as well. So every morning we send out a free quote of the day. If someone would like to get it, 7 days a week, a different mindset every day. And it's a quote that's tied to somebody famous that we studied throughout history. And it's a way to center your day and to pause and have intentionality. If they'd like to do that, we're happy to send them quotes. If they'd like to interact more fully with us, we'll share ways that they can do that. Everybody's heard about the IQ, and some people have heard about an EQ. We are getting ready to release something, EB, I'm super excited about. It's called the MQ, your mindset quotient.
Nice.
We have a really cool assessment that takes about 5 to 7 minutes to take, and people will be able to answer questions and get an assessment as to where they are on each of the 7 mindsets. It'll
that's
tell
fantastic.
them, hey, you're really strong on everything is possible, and maybe you need a little bit of practice on the attitude of gratitude mindset. And I took it the other day because we're testing and piloting. And so to be really transparent, I don't want anybody to think because I did the research and I was part of the team that I'm like off the charts on every mindset. No, I'm like everybody else. I've got the same negative thoughts. And I recently found that one of my weaker mindsets is mindset number 7, called the time is now. Like I need to act more. I need to put some things a little faster. And so I took the MQ and it gave me some suggestions of, hey, don't wait, put this into action. So that's going to come out soon. So anybody who signs up and they get some of the free stuff, we'll shoot them an email when the MQ's ready. And then hopefully that'll help them as well.
Oh, that's fantastic. And I love, again, one of the things that I respect and appreciate is the development using the 7 mindsets, but it develops even into more this MQ.
I've got a lot of folks that actually have been living the 7 mindsets ever since we published the first research. And now we have 9 independent research studies that actually prove that when you activate the mindsets in your life, things actually get better. So I used to say learning the 7 mindsets can be eye-opening, but living the 7 mindsets actually can be life-changing. Part of what we've done for organizations is we help create a language framework. The 7 mindsets is sort of like the ABCs, a new language, but a language for your mind. And it's just as important to know, to be able to speak that. So when I say everything is possible, hopefully now your listeners and viewers will realize what I'm saying is reach a little bit higher. And if I say passion first, what I'm saying is go inside and pause and say, are you doing something that's really authentic to you? And if I say we are connected, maybe the flip the switch is if you're walking around feeling like you're competing with people all the time, then you're probably off from the idea of helping and inspiring and empowering others. The 4th mindset is 100% accountable. So if you're walking around through life constantly pointing finger, I can't do this because, or that person said this to me, or that, or I got a bad hair day because of the weather. Like if you're going through life like that, you got to flip the switch because that's not going to help you be your best. It's probably one of the hardest, but here's a quick way for your listeners and viewers to discover if they might have some counter mindsets, okay? I'll say some things that we learned as kids, and let's see if people can fill in the last word here, okay? You can do it with me to make the point, all right? See if you can finish the sentence. Money doesn't grow on
trees.
Okay. Curiosity killed the
cat.
Don't make the same mistake
twice.
Okay, so these are all, you would say, harmless little sayings, but I bet you everybody listening could probably have filled in the same things that you said and that I said. what we learned through our research is that some of these things that were learned as kids, they get lost in translation. And when we're not really thinking about them, they influence our attitudes, our thoughts, our beliefs, and ultimately our actions. And so this idea of don't make the same mistake twice has this it has this counter mindset that mistakes are bad. Well, you show me an adult who hasn't made any mistakes, and I'll show you an adult who hasn't achieved much in his or her life. Mistakes are an integral part of success. And so oftentimes people don't want to be accountable because they're concerned that they might make mistakes. Well, shoot. You have to make mistakes. If you're not making mistakes, you're not trying hard enough. And the other thing is people often have this misconception of what success looks like. They think that success looks like a straight line between A to B. How am I going to go the best route from A to B? But think of it more like your GPS. If you're following directions and you made a right turn, but the GPS really wanted you to go straight, the GPS doesn't say, "You idiot, what are you doing?" I didn't say make a right. It just says, "Okay, well, here's where you are, but where would you like to be? Would you like to make a left?" And then if you keep going, "Oh, would you like to make a left here? Would you like to make a right here?" Like, we have to give ourselves grace to realize that failure is really only failure if you stop. I interviewed Lori Grenier from Shark Tank. I asked her, I said, "Well, what do you do if if you make a mistake in business or a mistake in the workplace? What do you do?" And she's like, "Well, what do you mean?" And I kept saying, "You go off course, you make a mistake." And she said, "What do you mean?" I thought she was teasing me, like she doesn't make mistakes. And then she says, "Oh, you mean if we stop?" Yeah, I guess that would be a failure or a mistake, but we just keep pivoting.
Yeah, I close the doors, I shut it down, I turn off the lights, we're done. It's philosophical. It gets into this aspect of what's the deeper truth that we're living by. And I love that the 7 Mindsets really taps into that. When you pause, when you raise awareness, who am I connected with? What truths have I held myself accountable to?
For me, one truth is we are all here to grow. It is all growth. It's all how do we live to our potential. Life in and of itself is about growth. And so if we go back to the early discussion you and I were having, our brain is oftentimes inadvertently preventing growth by having us remain in a comfort zone. And the comfort is growth includes friction. It includes doing things that are different. We all know if you don't like the results you have to try different things. But every time you try something different, your own brain is going to subconsciously get you back to the old habits. And so, knowing that a truth of life is growth, by becoming aware of this, we can lean into it. Another way of saying it is, how do we live to our fullest potential? How do we live our best life? That's one. What's another truth? Love. How do we love ourselves? How do we love others? Well, that's attitude of gratitude. The attitude of gratitude mindset is the fifth of the 7 mindsets. They've done studies on this, EB. People who write down what they're grateful for are more likely to feel better in their life, and they're more likely to attract similar things that have a similar type of energy of positive gratitude. They're more likely to attract it into their lives. And I know you mentioned, people dealing with stress and trauma. And this often comes up. Well, people will say, "Well, but how can you be grateful for that?" Well, you can't. We're human. So nobody's walking around saying, "I'm so grateful that you know, that, that I had this traumatic experience." But I know you've said in the past that resilience is more than just bouncing back. So there's this really wonderful, beautiful term called post traumatic growth.
Mm.
Post traumatic growth. And it goes beyond resilience. If resilience, a lot of people think of resilience as being able to bounce back. Post traumatic growth means that no matter what has happened to you, whatever the circumstances are, you actually have the ability to not just get back to where you were, but to grow from it.
Mhm.
And that is a mindset. That is a flip the switch mindset. Out of love for yourself, I believe if you ask empowering questions, even if you even the answers, you will get empowering answers back. So when something happens to us, or something happens to a loved one or a colleague, and we don't have the answers for it, we could ask questions like, I wonder what good may ultimately come from this. I wonder what I might learn that might benefit me or someone else I love and care about. So you don't have to have the answer, but I believe if you ask that sort of empowering question and then you pay attention, then maybe the suffering shortens. Maybe the awareness and the illumination happens sooner. But, you start combining growth and love of self and love for others. What else is there?
That's a great way to provide closure to, at least for now. I'm looking forward to the MQ. I'm looking forward to seeing what happens with that, and how people develop, how Seven Mindsets grows from even that. Scott, thank you so much for being on the show today. And I really hope people dive into this, they engage with this and want to learn more.
I want to thank you for having me on. If folks go to sevenmindsets.com/free, be my guest, get a free download immediately of the Seven Mindsets booklet, learn about them, put them into action. If you want to get the free quotes of the day, happy to do that. If you want to join me in my mission to create a mindset evolution, you want to help me bring this to more schools and kids and teachers, or bring into organizations, I'd love to bring the Seven Mindsets from the classroom to the living room to the boardroom. That would be me living my best. So thanks for helping to spread the word. I really, really appreciate it, EB.
Thank you, and keep fighting the good fight. We'll pay attention. All right, my friends, that was Scott Shickler with Seven Mindsets. And I'm sure you picked up that each of those mindsets could have been their own episode. I'm particularly drawn to things like accountability and dreaming big and connecting with who you are and really kind of digging beneath the surface. I believe that is where true health lives, is when you become more aware of who you are and what truths you're living by. That's the fastest and best way to really add value, whether it's in the classroom or the living room or the boardroom, like he was talking about. Click on the link, check out the booklet. I will keep you posted on the MQ when that hits the streets as well. But don't be afraid to listen to this again. I'll just say that. Don't be afraid to go back through this, really think about some of the things that he was offering and compare that to the book. Get the book, read it, meditate on it, think about how this can impact you in a positive way. Let's squash those ants. Let's get rid of those negative thoughts that we're sometimes dealing with or struggling with, those limited beliefs. And we'll keep pushing for resilience. We'll keep fighting for resilience. And until next time, EB out here.